Nike is now one of the most recognizable companies in the world. Its swoosh appears on shoes, clothing, stadiums, advertisements, and athletes across almost every major sport. The company's success can make its rise appear inevitable. It was not. In Shoe Dog, Nike founder Phil Knight tells the story of a business that spent years close to collapse. The company began without a famous brand, major financial support, or a revolutionary product of its own. Knight started with a simple idea. Japanese running shoes could challenge the German brands that dominated the American market. In 1962, shortly after finishing business school, Knight traveled to Japan and arranged to distribute shoes made by Onitsuka, the company behind the Tiger brand. He returned to the United States and began selling shoes from the trunk of his car at running events. The business was first called Blue Ribbon Sports. Its early years were filled with cash shortages, delayed shipments, unreliable suppliers, tense negotiations, bank pressure, lawsuits, and personal uncertainty. Knight often borrowed money to pay for the next shipment before the previous one had produced enough cash. Sales increased, but so did the danger. Every stage of growth required another large order, another loan, and another promise about a future nobody could guarantee. The people who built Nike were not polished corporate professionals. They were runners, coaches, former athletes, accountants, lawyers, and outsiders who felt connected by ambition and competition. Knight called them the butt faces, a strange but loyal group willing to solve problems that seemed impossible. The company's development was also driven by Bill Bowerman, Knight's former running coach at the University of Oregon. Bowerman constantly experimented with shoes, cutting them apart, changing their materials, and searching for ways to make athletes faster. His obsession helped turn Blue Ribbon from a distributor into a product innovator. Eventually, the relationship with Onitsuka deteriorated. Knight and his team created their own brand, chose the name Nike, and adopted a new symbol designed by a young graphic design student. The company that began as a distributor became an independent manufacturer, competing against some of the most powerful sports brands in the world. Shoe Dog is not presented as a perfect management guide. Knight admits to fear, secrecy, indecision, and mistakes. He sometimes failed to communicate clearly with employees and family members. He pursued growth so aggressively that the company's survival was repeatedly endangered. The memoir's central lesson is that entrepreneurship is rarely a smooth journey from idea to success. It is a long period of uncertainty in which belief, relationships, improvisation, and endurance matter as much as the original idea. Blink 1. Knight began with a simple but powerful idea. Phil Knight did not begin with a detailed plan to create a global sports empire. He began with what he called his crazy idea. While studying at Stanford Graduate School of Business, Knight wrote a paper suggesting that Japanese running shoes could challenge the German companies Adidas and Puma. Japan had already transformed industries such as cameras and electronics by producing high-quality goods at competitive prices. Knight believed the same could happen in athletic footwear. The idea appeared reasonable on paper, but turning it into a real business required action. After graduation, Knight traveled around the world. During a stop in Japan, he arranged a meeting with Onitsuka. When company representatives asked which business he represented, Knight invented a name, Blue Ribbon Sports. The company did not yet exist in any meaningful form. Still, he presented his idea and asked to distribute Tiger running shoes in the western United States. Onitsuka agreed to send samples. This moment illustrates one of the memoir's central themes. Entrepreneurs often need to move before they feel fully prepared. Knight did not possess extensive experience, a large company, or a clear guarantee of success. He had a belief that the market could change and enough confidence to begin the conversation. The crazy idea was also connected to something personal. Knight loved running. He understood runners, admired their discipline, and believed that better shoes could matter. He was not entering an industry only because the numbers appeared attractive. He felt emotionally connected to the product and the people who used it. That connection helped him continue when the business became financially and psychologically difficult. A strong business idea often begins where personal obsession meets an underserved market. Knight saw both. Blink 2. The business began through direct contact with customers. When the first shipment of Tiger shoes arrived, Knight did not have a network of retail stores. He sold directly to runners. He attended track meets, spoke with coaches, and opened the trunk of his car to display the shoes. This direct contact gave him more than revenue. It gave him information. He could see which designs attracted attention, which sizes sold, what runners disliked, and how they compared the shoes with existing brands. Knight was not selling to a general audience. He was selling to a community he understood. Runners cared about weight, comfort, traction, durability, and performance. They were willing to try an unfamiliar Japanese shoe when the person selling it understood their needs. The early sales process also relied heavily on trust. Blue Ribbon Sports had no long history or famous name. Customers bought partly because Knight and his partners were genuine members of the running world. Bill Bowerman added enormous credibility. As a respected coach, Bowerman understood athletes and had a reputation for pursuing better performance. When he became Knight's partner, the business gained both expertise and legitimacy. The direct sales approach was unglamorous. Knight drove long distances, carried boxes, managed orders, and completed ordinary administrative work. But these activities built the company's first customer base. They also established a culture that treated athletes as more than marketing symbols. Athletes were sources of product knowledge. Their experiences helped shape future designs. Large companies sometimes become distant from the people using their products. Blue Ribbon began close to them because it had no other choice. Knight's early experience shows that the first version of a business rarely needs an elaborate organization. It needs a real product, a clearly defined customer, and a method for learning directly from the market. Blink 3. Bill Bowerman turned shoes into a field for continuous experimentation. Bill Bowerman was not satisfied with simply importing and selling existing shoes. He wanted to improve them. As a running coach, Bowerman believed that small changes in weight, fit, cushioning, and traction could influence performance. He treated shoes as equipment that could be redesigned rather than fixed products that athletes simply accepted. Bowerman cut shoes open. He changed materials. He asked athletes to test different versions. He sent sketches and suggestions to Onitsuka. One important result was the Cortez, a running shoe developed through the relationship between Bowerman and the Japanese manufacturer. It provided greater cushioning and became one of the company's most successful early products. Bowerman's experiments gave Blue Ribbon something more valuable than a distribution contract. They created knowledge. The company began understanding how products could be designed around the actual movements and demands of athletes. Bowerman's most famous experiment came later from an ordinary breakfast appliance. While thinking about a sole that could grip the track while remaining light, he studied the pattern of a waffle iron. He poured rubber into it, damaging the appliance but discovering the basis for the waffle sole. The story became part of Nike's mythology because it represents practical innovation. Bowerman did not wait for a formal research laboratory. He observed a problem, experimented with available materials, and learned through failure. This approach also shaped Nike's future identity. The company would not compete only through lower prices or stronger promotion. It would compete through product performance and continual redesign. Innovation did not emerge from one perfect invention. It developed through repeated testing, close relationships with athletes, and a willingness to damage a few shoes and kitchen appliances while searching for something better. Blink 4. Rapid growth created a permanent cash crisis. Blue Ribbon's sales grew quickly. This should have made the company safer. Instead, growth repeatedly pushed it closer to failure. The problem was cash flow. Knight needed to order shoes from Japan months before selling them in the United States. Onitsuka expected payment. The company then had to wait for shipment, distribute the shoes, and collect money from customers. As demand increased, each new order became larger. That required more borrowing before the revenue from earlier shipments had fully arrived. The company could appear profitable on paper while having very little cash available. Knight became dependent on banks, especially a local bank that monitored Blue Ribbon's borrowing closely. Bankers were uncomfortable with the company's aggressive growth and limited financial reserves. Knight was equally frustrated because he believed the bank did not understand that demand justified larger orders. The conflict reveals an important business reality. Profit and cash are not the same. A growing company can fail when money leaves faster than it returns. Inventory, receivables, and expansion consume cash before they create profit. Knight chose growth repeatedly. Whenever extra money became available, he used it to order more shoes. He avoided building large cash reserves because he feared running out of inventory and losing momentum. This strategy helped Blue Ribbon expand, but it also made the company fragile. One delayed shipment, bank decision, or supplier dispute could threaten everything. Shoe Dog does not present financial caution as the only correct path. Without aggressive orders, Nike might never have gained enough scale to compete. But Knight's experience shows that rapid growth carries its own form of danger. Demand does not protect a company from insolvency when the timing of payments is poorly matched. Entrepreneurs must understand not only whether the business earns money, but when the money actually arrives. Blink 5. The early Nike team was built around outsiders and shared belief. Blue Ribbon Sports did not recruit a conventional group of corporate executives. Its early team included former runners, a heavy-set accountant, an injured athlete, and people whose personalities did not always fit traditional business culture. Knight affectionately called them the butt faces. The name reflected their informal humor and outsider identity. They did not look like the leaders of a future global company, but they believed deeply in the work. Jeff Johnson became one of the most important early employees. He was energetic, obsessive, and relentless. He wrote night-long letters, developed relationships with customers, opened the company's first retail store, and helped build the running community around the brand. His intensity sometimes overwhelmed Knight, but his commitment was essential. Bob Woodell, a former runner whose athletic career was changed by an accident, brought discipline and operational strength. Despite using a wheelchair, he handled difficult responsibilities and became one of Knight's most trusted partners. Accountant Del Hayes helped the company manage financial complexity. Others contributed legal knowledge, sales ability, product insight, and emotional loyalty. Knight's management style was often distant. He gave people freedom, partly because he trusted them, and partly because he disliked direct supervision and difficult conversations. Employees sometimes received little praise or clarity. Yet the lack of formal structure also allowed independent people to act. They solved problems without waiting for detailed instructions. The group became united by the feeling that they were building something outsiders did not yet understand. Culture was not created through corporate slogans. It came from shared difficulty. The team survived cash crises, supplier conflict, legal battles, and constant uncertainty together. This produced loyalty that would have been difficult to purchase with salaries alone. Blink 6. The partnership with Onitsuka became a struggle for survival. Blue Ribbon's growth depended heavily on Onitsuka. The Japanese company manufactured the Tiger shoes, controlled production, and could influence which distributor received access to the American market. At first, the relationship gave Knight the product he needed. Over time, it became a source of anxiety. Shipments were delayed. Communication was unclear. Blue Ribbon worried that Onitsuka might replace it with a larger or more established distributor. Onitsuka, in turn, questioned Blue Ribbon's financial stability and ability to handle the growing American market. Knight discovered that Onitsuka was speaking with other distributors. He responded by quietly exploring the possibility of producing shoes independently. This created a difficult ethical and strategic situation. Blue Ribbon still depended on Tiger shoes for most of its revenue. Openly announcing a new brand could cause Onitsuka to end the relationship before the company was ready. Remaining dependent on Onitsuka could allow the supplier to eliminate Blue Ribbon at any moment. Knight chose to prepare secretly. The conflict eventually became a legal battle over distribution rights, trademarks, and ownership of product designs. The court largely sided with Blue Ribbon, allowing the company to continue selling the important Cortez design under its own brand. The experience forced Nike to accept that Blue Ribbon could not build a secure future while its supplier controlled the company's survival. Partnerships can help a young business enter a market quickly. They can also create dangerous dependence when one side controls production, technology, customers, or distribution. Knight learned that growth without control was fragile. To become a lasting company, Blue Ribbon needed its own identity, products, and manufacturing relationships. The breakdown with Onitsuka was frightening, but it pushed the company toward independence. Blink 7. Nike emerged from urgency rather than perfect planning. The creation of Nike was not the result of a long, polished branding process. Blue Ribbon needed a new identity quickly because its relationship with Onitsuka was deteriorating. The company considered several names. Knight preferred Dimension 6, a name that few others liked. Jeff Johnson suggested Nike, named after the Greek goddess of victory. Knight remained uncertain, but the company needed to place a name on the shoes. Nike was selected partly because time was running out. The swoosh was created under similar pressure. Carolyn Davidson, a graphic design student whom Knight had met while teaching accounting, was asked to develop a symbol that suggested motion. She produced several possibilities. Knight selected the swoosh, although he was not immediately enthusiastic. He reportedly hoped it would grow on him. The logo later became one of the world's most valuable visual symbols. These stories show that important business decisions are not always accompanied by certainty. Founders often imagine that a great brand begins with a moment of perfect inspiration. Nike's identity emerged through deadlines, disagreement, limited resources, and practical necessity. What mattered was not that everyone immediately recognized the name and symbol as brilliant. The company later filled them with meaning. Athletes wore the shoes. Products improved. Advertising created emotional connections. Victories, failures, personalities, and stories accumulated around the brand. A name alone has little value. A logo becomes powerful through the experiences people associate with it. Nike also gave the team something psychologically important. It was no longer merely distributing another company's product. It was building its own future. The new identity turned a defensive response to supplier conflict into the foundation of an independent company. Blink 8. Athletes became partners in product development and storytelling. Nike's relationship with athletes became one of its greatest strengths. The company did not simply pay famous people to appear in advertisements. It worked with athletes, listened to their needs, and used their performances to demonstrate what the products represented. One of the most important early relationships was with runner Steve Prefontaine. Prefontaine was talented, charismatic, rebellious, and intensely competitive. He represented the spirit Nike wanted to express. After conflicts with amateur sports authorities and financial difficulties, he became connected with the company as an athlete and employee. Prefontaine helped promote Nike by racing, meeting runners, and carrying the brand directly into the running community. His appeal came from authenticity. Fans saw him as someone who refused to run cautiously. He competed from the front and accepted the possibility of failure. His personality made Nike feel like more than a shoe company. It became associated with courage, independence, and the refusal to hold back. Prefontaine's sudden death in 1975 deeply affected Knight and the company. It showed the emotional risk of building a business around real human relationships. Athletes were not replaceable promotional assets. They were friends, collaborators, and sources of inspiration. Nike continued developing this athlete-centered model. Feedback from competitors improved products. Athletic performance created credibility. Personal stories gave the brand emotional power. The company learned that people do not buy only materials and design. They also buy identity and aspiration. A shoe can represent speed, discipline, rebellion, or the hope of becoming a stronger version of oneself. Nike's marketing strength grew from connecting the product with those deeper meanings. Blink 9. Crisis repeatedly forced Nike to become stronger. Nike's survival was threatened not only by banks and suppliers, but also by the United States government. The company became involved in a major customs dispute. American officials argued that Nike owed millions of dollars in import duties under an old pricing rule. The amount was potentially devastating. Nike could not simply pay without risking collapse. Knight and his team responded aggressively. They studied the regulation, developed a lower-priced shoe called the One Line to influence the customs valuation method, filed a lawsuit, and used political and legal pressure to challenge the government's position. The eventual settlement was costly but survivable. The episode demonstrated a pattern repeated throughout the memoir. Nike encountered a threat that appeared capable of ending the company. The team felt fear, anger, and uncertainty. Then it searched for an unconventional response. These crises created enormous stress, but they also forced the company to develop capabilities it had previously lacked. Supplier conflict led to independent manufacturing. Cash shortages created stronger financial knowledge. Customs pressure produced legal and political sophistication. Product failures encouraged better quality control. Knight sometimes interpreted obstacles almost spiritually, as tests of whether the team truly believed in its mission. That belief could become dangerous when it encouraged excessive risk, but it also gave employees the emotional strength to continue when a purely financial calculation might have suggested surrender. Resilience is not the absence of fear or failure. Nike's early history included both. Resilience was the ability to keep making decisions while the outcome remained unclear. The company did not survive because it avoided crises. It survived because each crisis expanded its ability to handle the next one. Blink 10. The public offering created wealth but changed the meaning of the journey. By the late 1970s, Nike had become a rapidly growing company. Its products were gaining recognition, but expansion continued to consume cash. The company needed a more stable financial structure. Going public offered access to capital and reduced dependence on bank loans. Knight had mixed feelings about the idea. Public ownership could provide security, but it also meant greater scrutiny, reporting requirements, and outside influence. He feared losing the independent culture that had carried the company through its early struggles. Nike designed a share structure that allowed Knight and the founding group to retain significant control. In December 1980, the company completed its initial public offering. The event made Knight and several early employees wealthy. From the outside, it represented success, but Shoe Dog treats the moment with emotional complexity. The money did not erase the years of anxiety. It could not restore people who had been lost, especially Prefontaine or Knight's son Matthew, whose later death gives the memoir much of its sadness and perspective. Knight reflects on mistakes in both business and family life. His obsession with Nike demanded enormous attention. While he was physically present in his family's life, his thoughts were often consumed by cash, shipments, banks, lawsuits, and competition. The memoir therefore avoids presenting entrepreneurship as uncomplicated triumph. Building Nike gave Knight purpose, relationships, adventure, and wealth. It also required sacrifice and created regret. The company succeeded because a group of people continued pursuing a shared idea through uncertainty. But success did not make every decision correct or every cost acceptable. Knight's final reflections suggest that the true value of the journey was not the final valuation. It was the experience of believing in something, building it with others, and seeing an unlikely idea become real. Key takeaways from the book. Shoe Dog shows that Nike was built through uncertainty, cash crises, product experimentation, and strong relationships rather than one perfect strategy. Knight's original advantage was a simple insight, deep understanding of runners, and the willingness to begin before he felt fully prepared. Nike became independent by turning product innovation, athlete partnerships, and a loyal outsider culture into lasting strengths. The book's central lesson is that entrepreneurship requires endurance, adaptability, and belief, but success can also demand serious personal sacrifice.